Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's slow stitching video, we're going to take the fabric that we already have and just enhance the pattern. It's kind of like paint by numbers, but with stitching. And really anything goes. So you're going to take a look at your patterns and find a piece that you like about it. Now there might be different aspects to each pattern. There might be a little cluster of flowers or particular colors that you like. And those are the colors and the patterns that we're going to accent today. I'll show you examples of how I use this process, and then I'll just show you the way I do it. Now, everybody's result will be different, even if we use the same material, because there are different aspects about the fabrics and the patterns that we really like and that our individual eye is drawn to. So this is your chance to really enhance what you have. It's kind of a low pressure, slow stitching activity, and it's one of my favorites. I just take fabric that there's something about that I like, and it could be a standard ugly piece of fabric, but you're bringing new life to it and making it really pretty amazing. And here's my process. So here are 3 examples of how I take the fabric and just with a simple stitching, I emphasize creating a shadow, essentially, of whatever is on the fabric, the print that I want to use. So on this one here, I just took one of the little clusters of flowers and I made this cute little postage stamp. And on this one, I just have a little card here where I just took that fabric and I just decided to embroider some of the pieces. And in this case, I chose the darker print. It's kind of very effective and very cute. Now on the last one, I did a little more detail work where I took this print of fabric, which has all these little bunnies on it, and I just emphasized by outlining one of the bunnies. It's a very sweet little piece. Now you don't need special fabric to do this. Any fabric print that you have, you can embellish somehow. Because I just want to actually work on the prints that I have before me, I don't want to add a lot of detail work. This is kind of something you do when you have all this creative energy, but you don't want to really think too much. I just echo the colors that I see, but you don't have to. You can obviously change them to whatever suits your purpose as well as whatever supplies you have on hand. So in this fabric, I could just go around and really emphasize these little faces, and then I'd have something hand-stitched of these cute little faces. And I like this material. Here I have something a little more abstract, but these little dashes kind of give me the idea that I could do a lot of French knots in the various colors. Or I can do stripes going over the pieces. It kind of is like a paint by number. It gives me a guide from what to work on. And then there's this fabric, which I just think is beautiful, with all these very interesting colored leaves. And that's what we're going to use today. So I cut out a leaf here, this purple one, and that's what we're going to use just to embellish further by following the design that already exists. So I can use the leaf fabric and just cover my backing piece. And then I have the entire fabric and I can just focus on that. But I wanted to do something a little different, so I trimmed out the leaf, as you can see here. Now I'll go in here and just tidy up the edges a little bit. And I have the leaf. I have a little piece of fabric for the background that I want to put down. And then I have a little fabric word that I printed out that I thought was appropriate for the leaf. And it's a very just simple design. I can play around with the actual design of this piece. I kind of like the idea of the leaf hanging off the edge. And then my word here, and then I'll add my stitching embellishment. So the first thing I like to do is tack everything down. I'll use a pin and just roughly tack everything down. And I like to use the fewest amount of pins as possible. And from there I can start designing. I think I'm going to tack around this background piece first. So I just have a neutral color here, and this is just a little pearl thread. And I'll just start at the base here, and I'm just going to use a straight stitch all the way around the perimeter. And this will just give a very interesting and very basic effect, which is what I really like on these pieces. It doesn't detract from our focal point, which is the leaf. So I'll just go around with these short stitches. You can also do a running stitch as well. I like to anchor it down a little bit first, and then I can do the running stitch from there. So I'll make all my stitches and then show you how it looks. So now I've tacked all the way around with a straight stitch or a running stitch right around that background. And just because I want to get rid of the pin, I'm going to just tack down both edges here, the left and the right side. And again, I can use whatever stitch I want. I'm going to come up through my piece and just go diagonally across. And I'll just do this a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 stitches, just to hold it in place. I like the way it looks. It's a little rustic, and more importantly, it lets me get rid of my pin so that I don't get poked again. And I can decide if I want to make a cross stitch through my piece as well. So I'm just stitching through this fabric. You can use any fabric you have. If you want something with text on it, just choose a fabric that has text, or you can go and purchase fabric that you can print out on your machine. And if you're interested in seeing a video on that, just leave a comment below and I can do that in the future. So I'll stitch on the other side, remove that pin, and we can get started embellishing our leaf. So I have my 2 pieces stitched down, and now I'm ready to start embellishing the leaf. You can go about this however you'd like. You could stitch around your leaf to hold it into place, but I'm just going to dive right in, and my stitches will hold it into place. So I'm starting with the color that matches the really pretty purple here of this leaf, which is unusual in itself. And I want to stitch this little stem first. And really I'm just starting out by what strikes me as something I need to do. There's no right or wrong to this piece. And so I'm just going to stitch a split stitch, which means I stitch a stitch and then I come up right through that stitch with my needle. And this allows to make a nice little stem on the leaf here. Gives it a little dimension, and it also creates that line so that I don't have different angles coming out from that same stitch. I just have to make sure that I stitch through the threads here. Just like that. And so now I think I'm going to just stitch very gently around the perimeter of this piece. And again, it's just based on something that I want to do. There's no right or wrong. I'll continue with that stem stitch. I can make my stitches a little bit bigger now. And again, I just make my stitch, then I come up through that stitch, and I continue this all the way around the leaf. I don't want to make my stitches too big, and the smaller I make them, the neater it will look. But I really like this. Shape is very easy and very forgiving. Now I chose to go with a color that will blend right in with this background of the leaf, but you can use any color you'd like. I like this stitch because it curves very nicely when you want to change direction or create that arc of that shape. And I just come up, split the stitch, and create a new one. And I continue this all the way around. I'm using all 6 strands of embroidery floss here. I like that texture that it gives and the thickness, but you can use whatever number of strands you want, or if you want to just use cotton pearl thread or even sewing thread. The idea is to use what you have and what you like and what makes you comfortable. So I'm halfway around the leaf here. I'm going to continue stitching in, and I'll show you it when it's all complete, when I have this perimeter stitched. Okay, so I stitched around the perimeter of that leaf, and I get to remove that pin, and now I can just add whatever elements I want to my piece. I have this beautiful green thread that matches the dots here. I can add French knots if I want to, the length of the little veins here, but I'm just going to make little small stitches. I'm going to go on the bottom of each dot and just come back down. and it'll just make a little texture and a little color here. If the dots are too small, I can always combine the stitch, take it one length, and maybe I'll make that as a pattern. So I'll go one short stitch and one longer stitch, a dot and a dash. And that's the beauty of this, is you can really shake it up and change it as you like. You just use the print on your fabric as your starting point and then really have fun with it. If you're matching the colors like I'm doing, you don't have to be exact with your stitches because it will give you just the same color as the background. So now I'm going to just move to this leaf here, and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to do a stitch, combining those two, and then just a small stitch. And I'll continue this, the length of this leaf, varying the stitches so I have a new pattern emerging. We're at the dot and the dash. And if I wanted to, I can even skip that small little stitch, but I'm going to put it down there because I like that little raised texture. But you see, there's lots of ideas you can go with here. And I'll continue this the rest of the way up for all the green on this leaf. Now, if I want to, I can make this single dot into a longer dash, which is exactly what I'm going to do. And now I'll continue with the rest of the leaf and show you what it looks like. So I've stitched the dots and the dashes on one side of the leaf. I'm going to take my other color yarn and stitch just dashes on this side of the leaf. So I like to start at the top here. I just start at the top piece, and again, it's like painting by number. And I'm just using that print as a guide. And then I just like to stitch. And if there's an area where it ends as a dot, I'll just turn that into a dash. And I'll continue this, the remainder of this piece, and I'll show you the result. And so there, I've added my dashes on the left side, and that's just one way that I could really play around with that leaf. Again, this is how it starts out, just in the fabric, and then I take it and make it an element in my piece. Now I can continue to add stitches to my slow stitching piece using the colors from that leaf if I wanted to, or I can leave it just like that. It's just one way to add an element to your slow stitching work with your fabric that you may not have thought of already. So that's how I enhance the fabric that I already have, using stitches and colors that are already in the fabric. Now you can modify that and make it monotone or change the colors altogether. And that's what makes this so exciting, is that all the variations that you can get. I'm sure you do this process on your own and you never really thought about it necessarily. But this is a great way to use up fabric and all that creative energy that you have. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.